A few years ago, I was renting a house in Northern California. The neighborhood was just outside of the suburbs. It seemed like a perfect balance of having space and having nice neighbors close enough to not feel isolated. The area had no streetlights, so it was very dark at night, especially if there were clouds blocking the moonlight. It didn't bother me though. It made my house feel a little more quaint on the dark nights. I got home from work one day in midwinter. It was a cloudy night, so pulling up to my house, I saw only what my headlights and front porch light illuminated. When I got out of my car, I caught a whiff of cigarette smoke. That was odd, as I had never smelled that before around that house. I didn't see anyone nearby though, so I ignored it and went inside. I had just got off a shift with a few hours of overtime, so I felt pretty tired. Even though it wasn't even 7 yet, I had decided to shower and call it a night. I woke up sometime later, sure that I had heard a noise in my house. I wasn't worried right away because my friend would sometimes stop by and use my shower after work on his way to his night classes. I even gave him a spare key so he could stop by even if I wasn't home. He would always text me and let me know beforehand though, and I hadn't heard my phone go off. I reached over to my bedside table and picked up my cell phone to see if my friend had sent me a text. The bright light from my phone screen and number pad blinded me. These were the days before phones had a light sensor that would dim the screen in the dark, and this particular phone was so bright I could use it as a flashlight. Through squinted eyes, I could make out that it was 9 something, but I couldn't tell if I had an unread text or not. I set my phone aside and called out my friend's name. There were a couple of seconds of silence before I heard loud footfalls as someone started running through the bottom floor of my house. I leapt out of bed and ran to the closet. They were already up the stairs by the time I had opened the door and stepped inside. That house had 3 rooms upstairs, 2 bedrooms on either side of the hallway, the one I was in, and a spare, with a bathroom at the end. The bedroom doors were both closed, but the bathroom door was cracked open. I heard whoever was in my house thunder down the hallway past my door and into the bathroom. Thank God he did. That gave me enough time to open the attic access in the ceiling of my closet and hoist myself up. I had just started to lift myself up when the person ran back out of the bathroom. My feet were barely inside of the attic when my bedroom door burst open. I heard footsteps run into my room and stop. When they didn't see me in that room, they ran back into the hallway and into another room, which had just had boxes stacked in the corners, some weights, and a table I had painted my miniature models on. I guess they decided that if someone were hiding, it would be in the bedroom, because they had charged back into my room and turned the light on. A moment later, the closet door was ripped open. I was crouched in my attic a foot away or so from the access, so I could try to stop them if they started to climb up. From my vantage point, all I could see was about from their knees down. They were wearing dirty blue jeans with frayed cuffs and worn-out work boots. After a few seconds of looking in the closet, they stepped away and I heard a loud crash from my room followed by a scream of frustration and anger. The scream was the most unnerving part of the incident for me. It reminded me far too much of how my stepfather, who would scream in a similar way when he lost his temper. He would eventually be put in a mental hospital for several mental disorders that resulted in an erratic and violent temper. The man in my house had run back downstairs. I heard crashes and clatters as things were thrown around and furniture was knocked over. I stayed crouched in the attic. I had left my cell phone when I ran for the closet, and I was certain I could climb down without him hearing. After some time, the noises stopped. I started counting slowly. When I reached 1,000, I decided it was safe enough to climb down and call the police. The first thing I noticed when exiting the closet was that my intruder had flipped my bed over. I assumed it in an attempt to find me. That was the loud noise I had heard after he stepped away from the closet. I couldn't find my cell phone, so I went to the landline by my bed and called the police. I waited in my room until I heard them call from downstairs. The first floor was a mess, but I had expected that. Chairs had been knocked over, the sofa had been flipped, all the books, pictures, and knickknacks I had on my shelves were strewn across the floor. The cupboards in the kitchen had been opened, and all the boxes and canned foods had been thrown on the ground. As far as I could tell, though, the only thing missing was a single knife out of the wooden block in my kitchen. The police checked my house from top to bottom. They found that the side door had been forced open with something like a crowbar. They also found a few cigarette butts along my fence line with some foil and an empty pen tube, which the police said was something often used to smoke meth, so they think they had been watching my house for a while. I realized that they must have been out there smoking a cigarette when I got home. They collected up the evidence and told me I should stay with my family or friends that night and get the door fixed as soon as possible. I personally opted to just not sleep. I moved a shelf over to block the broken door and spent the next couple hours cleaning things up. I would often go to the window with a flashlight and shine it along the fence line where the police found the cigarette butts and foil, but I didn't see anything. The next day I called to have the door fixed and motion lights installed at the back and sides of my house. I also ran a phone cable up to the attic and added a landline. I never wanted to be stuck up there without a phone again. Nothing else happened in that house though. I lived there another 3 years without incident. One more precaution I ended up taking was practicing getting out of my bed, going to my closet, and climbing into the attic as quickly and as quietly as possible. I even kept at it when I moved, except now I go to the crawl space at the back of my closet instead of the attic. I try not to think about what would have happened if I had been a bit slower getting to the attic, or if I had gone into the bathroom at the end of the hall first. My fiance and I threw a dinner party one time to celebrate his mother completing chemo. I hired a caterer. We were expecting 25 friends and family, so it was more than our kitchenette of our single-story ranch house could handle. We'd only just moved in, so it didn't have a lot of cooking staples. The caterer said he'd bring everything 75% done, but he needed to finish off some dishes in our kitchen. I told him that was fine as long as he finished by 5, because the kitchen was centrally located and we prefer everyone be finished before the guest arrives due to the intimate nature of the occasion. He said that would be fine. He arrives at the scheduled 12 p.m. We gave him until 5 and the guests aren't even arriving until 6, so it's plenty of time. He smelled like actual dog feces, but his accent sounded European, so I thought maybe he just didn't believe in deodorant. It was more than sweat smell though. It smelled like sun-baked diaper, and it made me uneasy because he was going to be preparing food for sick prior and young kids. I just made sure he washed his hands and then left him to his own devices, worrying I was being presumptuous. Throughout the whole process he keeps pulling me aside to ask me questions and have me taste things. I was super busy because my husband had to work during the day and pick up the surprise guest right after, so setting up the deck, decorating, putting together the slideshow equipment, coordinating the surprise guests. We flew her and her sister. I had to make sure she got an Uber at the airport and her hotel was worked out etc. and just a million other little details. So every 10 minutes being asked things like, do you prefer this with paprika or without? With is fine, whatever you think. Taste it to be sure, was getting real old. When he was still here at 5:45, after 2 gentle reminders, I flat out told him he needed to be completely out by 6 no matter what. He apologized and said there had been a delay because our oven wouldn't stay up to temperature. I'd never had a problem with our oven, but I figured he's a professional, so maybe it was a subtle problem. A little before 6 rolls around, a few of our friends start trickling in, and I decided to tell him whatever's done is done, and whatever isn't he should just put in the fridge, but he's nowhere to be found. I go out on the deck to ask if my friends have seen him, and he's there, alcoholic beverage in hand, out of his chef whites and now in a tee and jeans, mingling with my friends. I walked out just in time for him to introduce himself to my cousin-in-law as a good friend of mine. Nope, too weird for me. I met him in person for the first time barely 6 hours ago. I told him he needed to leave, now. So he goes inside and gets his bag and makes a beeline for my bedroom. I'm taken aback. I say, "Excuse me, where are you going?" And he says, "To change." So first of all, we have a guest bathroom clearly visible. Second, why can't he wear a t-shirt and jeans home? I tell him I'm not comfortable with him going in my room, but he insists it'll only be a second and goes in and shuts and locks the door. I couldn't even get a word out before he went in, and of course I felt helpless. I was going outside to ask one of my friends to help me usher him out, but at that point my fiance got there with my aunt-in-law. I had to explain the situation to him, nearly in tears at that point, and he was like, "What? He went in the bedroom, why?" So he pounded on the door, and the caterer came out, still in a t-shirt and jeans, and my fiance said, "You shouldn't be here, you need to leave." And the caterer said, "Excuse me, but this is not your house, it is not up for you to decide." And my 6'4", 260-pound fiance tells him, yes, this is actually his house, and puts his hand on his back and guides him to the front door. The caterer says, "I thought my name lived here." And he says, "Yes, my fiance lives here with me," and the caterer goes absolutely nuts. He turns around and screams, "You lied to me, you bitch." I have no clue what he's talking about. He starts yelling about how I let him on, calling me a bitch and some more. I don't know who he thought the man was in the pictures with me or around the house was, so my fiance says, "Oh no, you won't talk that way in my house. Find the door." and the caterer goes to the kitchen and starts throwing trays of food out of the refrigerator onto the floor. At this point, my fiance realized two of his brothers, both currently offensive linemen at college level, had come in and were on the deck. He signaled to them and they came inside, and he basically said, "This guy's harassing my name. Since they're a family of boys and my fiance is the first to get married, they don't get to flex their protective muscles too often," and jumped at the chance to toss this guy out. The party went on as planned, but I insisted that we just order pizza and throw out all the food he'd made. My fiance and friends kept saying, "Isn't that a bit much?" but I was insistent. We went out late drinking with his brothers and got home around 3:30 a.m. We passed out in our room. At around 5 a.m. I was woken up by the sound of the door opening. I figure either we forgot to lock the door in our drunken stupor and it blew open, or one of the family forgot their keys or something in the house and didn't want to wake us. His parents and his local brother have a key, but his parents never let themselves in when they knew we were home, and his brother had even more than we had, so he was definitely not awake and driving around at 5 a.m. It turned out to be not nearly enough to have blown the door open, as it had been tranquil all night. So I wake up my fiance and whisper, "Someone just came in the house," and he said the same thing. Probably my brother left his wallet or something. I figure I'm being paranoid and try to put it to rest when I hear a loud crash within the house. With that, my fiance was up on his feet, and in one movement, he told me to lock myself in the closet and call 911 while he went to go look around. As I was pulling out my phone, we hear that distinct accent, my name, "Hello?" And I realize it's just this insane caterer. I'm not worried about this caterer physically overpowering my fiance, or me for that matter, so I charge right out there. The caterer is shirtless and clearly on something. He's taking pictures that are just me off the wall and holding several in his arms already. He lunges towards me when he sees me. My fiance gets between me and him and I call 911. Fiance tells him the cops have been called and it's in his best interest to get off the property. Caterer says, "No, I have to make sure my name is okay." And I say, "What? Why wouldn't I be okay?" And my fiance rightfully says not to engage with him and feed into it. My fiance stays between me and him while I climb out the window. He watches as the caterer throws photos of us on the floor. Fiance didn't want to touch or subdue him in any way, so the caterer couldn't make any assault claims. He's begun to destroy our kitchen at this point, and when the cops come in, he has a butcher knife. My fiance considered going for the gun safe when he first got the knife, since we live in a standard ground state, but he decided the situation was hectic enough without introducing a firearm. Caterer doesn't obey police's orders to drop his weapon, and he says he, quote-unquote, "isn't leaving without me," so they tase him. It's lucky for him he only got tased and he didn't antagonize my husband into squashing him. As he's let out in cuffs, he's shouting out how he and I are in love, and it figures that I chose a macho thug over some sweet sensitive artist like him, and all women are whores, etc, etc. He continues on this tirade for the entire time the police are reading him his rights. The police ask us to do inventory of our house to see if there's anything missing or damaged besides what we witnessed him do. We go around and there's nothing. But then I remember that he was in our room yesterday, and I go through my room. All my underwear from the dirty laundry hamper were gone, and my vibrator had been moved from where I keep it. We were so freaked out after the aftermath that we had replaced our kitchenware, toothbrushes, sent our sheets to be professionally cleaned, and had a cleaning crew do a deep clean on the whole house. So glad we decided not to serve the food to our guests and my fiance's medically fragile mother. He sent me a letter from prison, and thankfully my husband intercepted it, because I was still recovering from the whole thing. We gave it to the police, who helped us get a issued no contact order. He was sentenced to 3 years in prison 5 years ago, so he's out by now, but thankfully we did not meet. I know this last one isn't technically a home invasion story, but it's kind of hits close to home since it's in the area I grew up in, and it still ended up in some pretty dire situations. This all started a couple days ago, July 5th, where I'd get random calls from FedEx around 10 p.m. where they'd ask me for my name and address, which they supposedly already knew. I gave it to him thinking it was maybe a package that had been lost and somehow found its way home. Hindsight, I should have known FedEx doesn't deliver past 8 p.m. here in Canada. I had thought nothing of it until I got another phone call saying they can't find my unit number and asked me to come out to the roundabout nearby my place. My father thought it was weird, so he patrolled the area to find these people. My dad did around 4 laps. The first lap, there wasn't anything there, but then I got curious and joined him for the second lap, and yet again nothing. I went back in the house, and my dad did a third lap around. He found a gray SUV and confronted them. They told my dad they weren't the delivery person, and my dad left to do another confirmation check. As he was doing the last lap, the SUV wasn't there. The next day, July 6th, between 6 p.m. and 11 p.m., we hear a doorbell ringing, and I went down to check. There were 2 individuals around the ages of 20 or so. They knew my name and were calling out for me. I thought it was weird because I had never seen them before. I didn't feel safe, so I didn't pursue them. They kept coming over and over again, so we called the police and talked about what we should do. The cops told us to contact them if it ever happens again. The next day, July 7th, it was very quiet and nothing weird happened, so we thought the worst ended and we just went on with the day. The day after that, July 8th, it was the same quietness, but when the time approached 11 p.m., my security camera spotted an individual in a mask taking photos and video of the current house. This was my breaking point. We contacted the police and informed them about this odd behavior. Just when I thought it was over, I was casually in my living room at around 3 a.m. the same day, July 8th. I heard something thunking outside my balcony. I thought it could be anything and didn't mind it until I heard it again. I went to the balcony to go see what I was hearing, and then it clicked. I was face to face with the intruder. I started screaming for help and my family came down to check out the commotion. Thank God I checked the balcony that day. Who knows what else could have happened. Today is July 9th and I haven't gotten a wink of sleep thinking about that terror that I faced. Am I one of the targets of a home invasion? How did they get my name? What do they want from me? Update. The situation has calmed down and the police are on the report. Currently, I'm at an Airbnb until the construction is finished. Update number 2. Since then, my house was lit on fire. They say it was a Molotov. They've been telling me to lay low and stop posting on social media since. If you liked the video, make sure to like and subscribe. Please, comment your feedback. Until next time, my misfits. Toodaloo.